Yeah, I did change, and I'm really glad I changed.
This one's wife. Bored of Harry, but not other men. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. The narcissist that is this one's wife's approach to the two genders can be summed up as follows. Women are seen as a threat to her control. They are rivals, they're competitors, and she only utilises them by way of supposed friendship for the purposes of the management of the facade of being a good friend, a caring, empathic mother, an empowered feminist. But women are seen as threats to control that are there to steal the limelight from her and must be dealt with appropriately. With regard to men, men are similarly to be used, but in a different way, whereby she seduces them. Her narcissism and her magical thinking causes her to believe that every man fancies her, that every man wants to knock her hip out, and this allows her to utilise one of the very few talents that she has, sex. There is no doubt, like many somatic narcissists, that this one's wife is hypersexualized. After all, Harry did say she'll let you do anything you want, and that would cater to the randy, dim-witted ginger one. She has no charisma. She doesn't really care. She's not particularly interesting. She's not fun. She lacks a sense of humour. But, as I've said many times before, what she's probably very capable of is sucking a golf ball through 40 feet of hosepipe, with the consequence that she will ride Harry until his balls are shriveled raisins. And this is something that she has utilised to her advantage with her dealings with men. We've seen in the past the way that she would talk in effusive tones about her father. You may recall the picture of her cozying up to the father of one of her friends when she was just a young girl. The pose seemed inappropriate, not on the part of the man, but with regard to her. At an early age, she was utilising sex and sexuality for the purposes of trying to control men. She has had a fairly long list of partners that we know about, and undoubtedly there will be plenty more that we do not know about. And there are the rumours, of course, of her essentially being a pleasure appliance on board a yacht. Thus, this one's wife seeks to seduce men. And a series of photographs were brought to my attention where I was asked my observations about what we see in them for the purposes of understanding more about the nature of this one's wife. Let's have a look at those photographs. There have been many instances where we have seen this one's wife with the grip of doom holding on to Harry. We have seen instances where she's kissed him with her hands up against his face. We saw at the Invictus Games her leaning in with a display of lovey-doveyness, which, as I explained at the time, was all part of performative actions for the purposes of facade management. Here is a photograph which is interesting. It was shown during their Harry and This One's Wife documentary and comes from their personal stash of photographs, i.e. when it was taken, it wasn't taken by a bank of photographers. It wasn't taken with the intention of circulation at that point. Indeed, it most likely has either been taken by one other person known to this one's wife and Harry, or might even have been taken by Harry himself. The point is, this was not a picture that was taken at the time for mass circulation, therefore facade management was not relevant. And what do we see? Harry leaning into this one's wife, not the other way around. Harry looking happy and enthused. This one's wife with a slight smile on her face, no smile in her eyes, looking probably rather bored. And this is quite the contrast with other photographs that I'm going to show you. So what's going on here? Is he already being devalued? Well, the answer is no, he's not, because this photograph was taken when they were dating, and they were very much in the golden period. But remember, at this stage, Harry was already under her control. He'd been ensnared, even though they were dating. Undoubtedly, they had made the beast with two backs at this juncture, that he was enjoying the lashings of spicy poontang that he was being given by her. And thus, for this photograph, there was no need to make an effort. There was no need to make an effort vis-a-vis facade management. There was no need to make an effort by looking thrilled towards Harry, because he was already under control. The narcissism didn't need to do anything more in that instance. Hence, this one's wife doesn't look enthused, doesn't look excited, doesn't look into Harry. She looks bored. It isn't devaluation per se because she's not mistreating him, but it's simply that she's not being effusive in her enthusiasm for him, because the narcissism deems that it is not necessary. It isn't required. And thus we get this interesting pose whereby Harry looks excited, enthusiastic, and this one's wife doesn't look particularly impressed by being next to him. And it demonstrates that her enthusiasm is entirely manufactured for the purpose of the pursuit of the prime aims. And here, Harry's providing fuel, Harry's under control, therefore she need not do any more. And this is reflected in the expression and body language you see in this photograph. Now, let's contrast that picture of her and Harry with a number of pictures that you may have seen, which have been taken at different times over the last few years. They all show this one's wife with various men, and as I'm talking, they'll be floating across your screen. The first is a photograph that was circulated recently involving this one's wife and Jake Rosenberg, who is a photographer that has worked with this one's wife in relation to photographing some items for As Ever, and has worked with her in the past. She knows him and he knows her from Toronto. You'll notice in this pose that she's leaning on his shoulder, hands clasped, head near his head. You'd mistake it for a picture of a married couple, given the intimacy that is demonstrated there. Why are we seeing her behave in this manner? Well, it's being done, of course, because Rosenberg, as a non-intimate secondary source, has been taken off the shelf and he needs to be controlled. He's painted white, which means that she in effect seduces him. I'm not suggesting that there has been a bumping of uglies, but rather that her magical thinking causes her to believe that Rosenberg fancies her, and she has a degree of infatuation with him. Her lack of boundary recognition means that, notwithstanding the fact that she's married to Harry, she engages in this intimate pose, which is far more than you would expect between somebody who is a friend and a supplier, but not in the world of this one's wife. In order to seduce Rosenberg, and I mean that in terms of bringing him under control in the narcissistic sense, not necessarily go to bed with him, her narcissism decrees that it is appropriate to pose for a photograph together in this way to make him feel special, and so she does. We see also a photograph taken with her pimp, Marcus Anderson. Again, this could be a picture of husband and wife who've been interrupted in their conversation at some kind of event. He's smiling. She's trying to look demure. There's a conspiratorial air between them. She doesn't look bored. She's leaning in towards him as if she's interested. And again, this is being done because her narcissism is causing her to seek to seduce him, to treat him favourably, to make him feel special. Next, we see a picture of this one's wife with Serena Williams' husband, Alexis. Here, she's looking at him as if she's about to pick a little bit of food out of his teeth or to remove some scrambled egg from his beard. She is leaning her arm on his upper arm. She's gazing at him like an intimate partner might look at him, even though he's married to somebody else. Her lack of boundary recognition means that she invades his personal space in this intimate way, and also has no due regard for the fact that he's married to somebody else. Her absence of emotional empathy means she doesn't give a fig for how embarrassing it might be for Alexis, or how unfortunate it might be for Serena Williams. Her narcissism decrees that she must, again, not necessarily in an intimate way, seduce Alexis, and it causes her to gaze upon him as if she were looking upon a lover. Because that's what the narcissism does. Because she has no genuine emotional empathy, it causes her to emulate these behaviours. And it means that all of these men that you see, who are all non-intimate secondary sources, as far as we know, potentially some could be intimate, but for the moment we'll stay with non-intimate secondary sources in her fuel matrix. Her narcissism causes her to look upon these individuals and behave towards them in a favourable, almost loving fashion, because that's what her narcissism decrees is the appropriate thing to do to gain the control over these individuals who are painted white. In each moment, she needs to bring them under control. And rather than do so by being fun and interesting and kind, it causes her to use sexuality. It causes her to use intimacy. It causes her to violate boundaries. In a similar way, there's the picture of Nacho Figueres, again, married to somebody else and a friend of her husband. But that doesn't stop her looking as if they're having a cheeky snog by a vehicle at a polo match as she stares at him, his arm upon her hand upon his shoulder. Again, if you didn't know who it was, you might think this was an intimate couple. And once again, what you're seeing is the way that with this one's wife, when it comes to other men, because she isn't involved in an ongoing intimate relationship with them, in the sense none of them are an intimate partner primary source, they're all shelf appliances, which means they're taken off the shelf and they're painted white. And thus, because they're painted white, and in order to control them in the moment, she uses seduction as a means to bring them under control. To look at them as if they are an intimate partner, to touch them as if they are an intimate partner, to hug them, to hold them, to pose with them, in all the ways that if you didn't know who you were looking at, you might think that was husband and wife or boyfriend and girlfriend. Because when it comes to other men, this one's wife's default position, whether it actually involves intimacy or not, is to seek to seduce. And the result is all of the boundary transgressions that you have seen. Thus, those are the differences that you see in relation to a photograph of Harry, where he was already under control and therefore her enthusiasm need not be shown, and other instances where the individuals are being brought under control in the moment, and therefore her lack of boundary recognition causes her to treat them as if they are intimate partners. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.